Marquila, Mariana, Amari, Austin, Nikki. All
Hello.
I gotta let everybody in the room. Hold on. Hi. Yeah, that was sorry, I got stuck on a call with a uh, prospective employer. So anybody who's interested in going to a managed service IT staffing firm, um, wants to get into recruiting in the Chicagoland area, they are one of the best. So that was a great, he actually found us online, so that could be a good fit for somebody to take over. And I'm going to do a demo call with them. So you guys will be joining that as well as a group, silent group, hopefully. So you guys can hear what that sounds like. Um, but yeah, so they just hired a retired sergeant major and a first sergeant from the Air Force, so a Marine and a first sergeant. So they're really excited about that. Um, and so, they understand the value in hiring military. So I think we're gonna do some good business there. We also, I think, told you we just pretty close to signing with a real estate company, which I had never expected to use. But Mariana, I think since the last time you and me and Julie talked, I don't know if we'd gotten it yet, but we're now a fully registered apprenticeship program with the Department of Labor. So they've also jumped
Exciting.
for us.
Congratulations.
Thanks. And for ZoomInfo, that's huge. So if you guys end up partnering with us, one of the things we can do is put you as a host company. And not only will you be able to get the tax credits, they'll be able to draw BAH while they're part of your team. So it supplements their income and also makes them stickier. So in Chicago, they'll draw another $2,000 a month that you don't have to pay for that the government gives them for being part of your program. So a lot for us to discuss on that side. But guys, I'm really glad, and girls, ladies and gentlemen, we have Mariana and we have Julie here. And so we'd had a couple of different calls. Mariana is responsible if you just got a Zoom license, which I think a few people just did. We were having to circle them around because we didn't have enough. They gave us, I think, five more licenses, so everybody can have a license, which is great. So big thank you to them for doing that. They are salespeople through and through. So they are here to tell their stories about sales and about recruiting and about ZoomInfo. And they're also advocating to try to figure out how we can price this thing out so we can make it affordable for us. So we can scale this, maybe student licenses. We're still figuring that out, but they have been absolutely incredible and big supporters of what we're doing. So I will turn it over to you, Mariana, and let you do the introductions. But just your rank, title, role, social security number. No, we don't need that. Just need to know who you are and what you do would be great. And then this is our cohort. So this is most of the people that are in our cohort. Some people are at VA appointments and things, but they just got done meeting in small groups, learning how to pick sales platoon. So they'll do this, and they go to lunch, and they come back, and they got to deal with me for another 3 hours. So I'm sure they're happy to hear from
Nice
some.
little break from you. You
Yes,
can just go ahead and mute yourself now then, and I'll
I.
just take over. Um, everyone, my name is Mari. I'm your account manager here at ZoomInfo. It's great to meet you all. And first and foremost, thank you all for your service. I started working with Rally when you guys came aboard. And I'm kind of your main point of contact person for all of your contractual needs. So I am your sales gal. And then you guys have like all of the customer support people, the people that we can say like, here's the value that you're getting from your contract. And Julie's my director. So she's my manager's boss. I'll let her introduce herself.
Yes. Hi. Thanks, Mari. So my name is Julie Kavanaugh. I oversee a portion of our account management team here at ZoomInfo. So what that is anyone with an existing relationship, a current contract with ZoomInfo. I have a team, 5 different teams that all have account managers on them, like Mari, that help manage those relationships. So how we're kind of just to give you a little show is how we're divided up at ZoomInfo is, of course, we have the new business side. So those account executives that are working to hunt and find new companies to come on board with ZoomInfo. And so once they sign that contract and get that company on board, they then hand it over to my side of the house, a portion of it that I manage. And so specifically that portion that I manage is mainly I have one mid-market team, which we consider any company 250 to about 500 employees. But then the other 4 teams that I manage are all SMB, so small businesses that we rank as about under 100, 150 employees. So yeah, excited to be here today, talk with you guys, and answer any questions as well that you guys have.
Yeah, I figured we could start talking a little bit about how we got into sales, and then we can talk a little bit more about the sales structure, different roles. You guys can kind of identify, as you are applying for sales jobs, where you think you'd lie. Is that a good plan for everybody? Nods. Great. So,
Patrick just said you guys got to start all over. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh.
No, there you go. And then, Mari, I want to ask you guys. So generally what we'll do is we record these for our internal use, but then we also stream it to our Facebook channel because there are active duty military that are very curious about, and we have like 3 followers. So if that's okay with you guys, I don't know if that's all right with you guys to do that. I just wanted to ask before we do it.
Yep, that should be fine.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, no worries. All right, so back over to you guys. Sorry for taking your
No,
word.
that's okay. So I am a first generation immigrant. So my parents, just like the majority of immigrants, really, really, really wanted me to be a doctor. So I actually started after I graduated high school. I did go to nursing school and I did double majored in nursing and pre-med. And as much as like I did find I'm pretty adaptable, I just really, really hate hospitals. And it was like a miserable experience. And I found myself working for a recruiting company, a staffing company. I'm like a pretty good people person. And my job was to find people to fill jobs. And one of the things that we did in that role is like a salesperson from the company would come in and they would say, hey, I got a contract from company ABC and they need 3 people. And they actually work with a few other agencies already, but they're going to give us a shot for, 1 or 3 people. And my job was to interview and find people to fill those roles. And what I started doing is I would go on Fridays, I would go and instead of going to the office, I would visit these companies that only gave us a shot for like 1 or 2 or 3 people. And I started to build a relationship with them. And I would come back and tell the salesperson, hey, I actually got them to up our quota. Like they gave us 10 roles or they gave us 15 roles, or they're actually going to replace us with this other agency. And the salespeople would be like, oh my gosh, that's so awesome. Mari's getting us more recs. And they told their manager that, and their manager reached out to me and said, she literally said, do you want to come to the dark side of sales? And pulled me from recruiting and gave me my first sales job. And that was really, honestly, one of the hardest sales jobs I've ever had because it was selling people. You were not only selling that your recruiters were going to be able to fill those jobs, you're also selling that those people were going to accept the jobs and then show up to the jobs the next day. So, but it was one of those small companies where you're really doing a lot. We didn't have SDRs calling, setting up meetings. And then we didn't have a tool like ZoomInfo. So I would call company directories and just open like extension after extension. I would figure out this person's name was, Larry Lee, and I would try Larry.Lee at, or L.Lee at, or Larry L at, and I would just do that all day trying to generate meetings. And then I was also the AE, so I also have to go to the meetings. And then I was also managing that relationship afterwards. So depending on like what company you end up going to into sales, there is a lot of different paths, but there are those companies that are smaller that you really have to get scrappy and do a lot of it. I also know you guys use HubSpot. This company did not invest in a CRM. So we literally managed our book of business from not even like a Google Doc where you could go in and update it for everybody. It was an Excel spreadsheet where I just filled things out and then I just had to send it to my boss like every Monday, updating her, which was absolutely brutal to just have to like working off of like and something like that. But that's kind of how I got into sales. And then I moved over to the customer success side for a little bit in my next role. one of the things that you will notice as you're applying to sales jobs, and I think Julie can talk a little bit about that at some point, is that there are what we call hunters and gatherers. And the hunters are really just always going after new business and always trying to build that relationship. You're always starting from scratch. You're always trying to sell and kind of remove the status quo because they already have a provider for whatever it is that you're selling. And then there's the second, the farmers, not gatherers. Farmers are the people that are kind of just maintain that relationship and sell based on the relationship that you already have. So most companies, when you are in that type of account management role, you have your quota that is based on your existing book of business, but you have to increase that. So you only have, let's say, 50 companies, and you're trying to sell them, not just on resell them what they already have, but you're trying to grow that relationship. And after doing a little bit of both, the cold calling, the AE job, and doing that second piece, I really found that my strength really lied in that relationship building piece. And that's what I enjoy doing, which is why I switched to account management permanently. And we never having used anything like ZoomInfo before, when I found out a couple of my colleagues from my previous company had moved over to ZoomInfo, and they really said great things. And that's kind of how I ended up here.
Awesome.
Ooh, I know I just talked a lot. Do you guys have any questions? I feel like getting into sales, like I always joke, it's never a thing. Like you've never asked like a little boy or a little girl, like, what do you want to be when they grow up? And they're like, I want to be a salesperson. Right? Has anyone ever heard that?
Dusty, were you nodding your head, Dusty? Did you want to?
No, it was an affirmation, yeah,
yes, okay. I wasn't sure. I was like, were you that little kid we've been looking for who was like, I'm gonna be a sales guy?
Right.
No,
but I think that was a while ago. And I think sales is becoming a more and more respected profession. And it definitely takes skill. Julie knows the story in and out. I'm a pretty analytical person. And last year I had a month where I couldn't sell anything. I could have said like, this is $1, and people did not want it. It was absolutely brutal. And I went back and I listened to all of my calls, and I actually picked out a few people that were doing way better than I did, and I listened to their calls, and I was like, oh, okay, like here's what they're talking about, and I'm talking about like minuscule details that no one cares about, that I'm just so focused on, when they're really painting a big picture. And I was able to kind of take that and say, okay, this is why I'm not doing so well right now, and pivoted. It really does take skill to do that, to admit that you're not doing well, to say, hey, it's not the product, it is you. You need to kind of change how you're talking about it. And I think it's a really well-respected profession now, and it gives you a lot of opportunity to grow, not just professionally, but personally as well.
Awesome. Well, I can kind of take over from there as well. I think kind of in stemming off of no one kind of thinks of going into sales. I had no clue, Mari, that you were pre-med. I was a molecular and cellular biology major until my second semester senior year.
I had no idea, Julie.
I know, I had no clue.
Why we get along so well, because we're just nerds.
Yeah, exactly. My friends kind of sat me down being like, Julie, the idea that you could be someone's doctor one day frightens me. Because let's just say like, you wouldn't want me practicing medicine on anyone. I would probably get focused and lose halfway, change my ideas halfway through a meeting with a patient. And so I graduated college and landed myself what I wasn't really quite aware of at the time, which was my first sales job. It was working for a company, an educational travel company called EF Education, where I actually spent most of my professional career, about 12 and a half years there. And it was because of the mission of that company. It was really kind of helping break down barriers of culture, language, and geography, and having, helping high school kids predominantly in the US travel abroad and understand kind of just how large the world is and become a better global citizen. So there, though, I was selling, and I didn't realize that when I first started. And when I sat down at my first desk, and they gave me a phone and I started cranking calls, I realized quickly like, oh, this is sales. And I had not really envisioned being in sales. Here I am, what, more than 15 years later. I don't know how many years it's been, well over that now. And I love it. I'm super excited of being in this profession. And what I love the most about it is you get in what you put out. And if you believe, if you are passionate too about some of the products that you sell, I think that's one of the really key pieces is really kind of identifying with the company that you decide to work for one day, and the product. Take ZoomInfo, it's data. It's a lot more than that. But when I was looking to leave the travel world and talk about kind of all of these amazing locations with teachers and administrators, it was really hard for me to be like, wait, I'm going to go from doing that to selling data. But what's been so amazing about ZoomInfo is how we help companies and partner with companies and help them grow, specifically in that SMB space. As Mari was saying, she spent a majority of her time at other sales jobs trying to figure out how to reach customers who are prospects, and how to kind of cross-sell within her accounts and finding who would you reach out to within those companies. And as you guys know from using ZoomInfo, you have a tool that can really help you do that. So while it could be seen as just data and information, it's really a lot more. And it's the backbone of how a lot of companies position their growth goals over the next year and their go-to-market strategy. I think one of the things too, as you guys all, how do I like my Peloton? Oh, just a quick note on that Peloton. I saw the question in the chat. I bought this like years ago before COVID. I wish I used it a lot more in COVID. Luckily I've never hung furniture on it, but it is a great tool for those people who like to work out in a room. I'm much more of an outdoors person. And so going back to kind of when you're looking for a company, I think it's really important to understand, can you envision yourself selling that product? And I think one of the things I always look for when I'm interviewing candidates, so I always say there's 3 things that I need a candidate to have that I can't really help them with. And those 3 things are a strong work ethic, which, obviously I'm sure you guys know, especially from your previous experiences, that's so important to help get you through those tough times. To be coachable. I think Mari hit on exactly why being coachable is so important when she mentioned there was a month where she found herself in a rut. What makes Mari, so great to work with is, of course, there could be things that are happening within her accounts, but she didn't say, it's my accounts. The accounts you gave me, Julie, just don't want to buy anything. Her first thing was she kind of realized, like, let me take a look and listen to my calls. Let me hear what my colleagues are doing. And I think being coachable is really key in sales, because while you might have one style, in order to resonate with all of the prospects and customers you work with, you'll have to adapt that style. And it might challenge you to be a little bit outside of your comfort zone sometimes, but that's going to help you grow and kind of learn a new way of having a conversation to, convey the value and end up closing that deal with a customer that you might, not really jive with. You just might kind of not really, one might speak slower or faster, whatever it may be. So strong work ethic, coachable. And then the last thing is, of course, I think a positive attitude. And I don't say that in a sense of like bonehead optimism of just like walking around, always being like everything sunshine and daffodils. We all have our bad months, our bad weeks, but I think really believing in yourself, believing in your ability, and believing in the product that you are working with are really key, and knowing that you can hit your goals. The goals might be hard. That's why they're goals. But I think those 3 things, just, again, kind of a strong work ethic, positive attitude, and coachable, are 3 things that I always say to candidates, I really can't create. I can't give you that when you walk in the door. I can help you with how to position our product, price negotiation, things like that. But it's hard to kind of influence and adapt and coach someone to have one of those 3 things if they don't already. Any questions? I know we've been talking quite a bit.
And we got Jason, Bernard, and Patrick with questions. Jason first.
Hi, Mari, and I really appreciated Julie both coming on today to talk to us. I like those 3 easy things we can remember: the work ethic, being coachable, having a positive attitude. I can relate with the analytical piece and the high D attributes, and in terms of the initial call just being, more of a 50,000 foot view and an introduction, and making sure that, at least from what I'm learning, in this program, making sure that the person you're calling is at least warming up to you. So I'm working through my pitch. I'm sure it's, a lifelong process of improvement. My question was regarding communication styles and perhaps generation gaps. If you and Mari could possibly relate to, like, using different electronic means, emails, text messages, or phone calls, and relating to people, whether you're the one calling or you're the one receiving the phone call, and any communication or maybe underdeveloped communication habits that you may have run across with millennials, or with, and versus, more seasoned, experienced folks that like to be talked to. If you have any insight for us, so we're not just, hey, what's up, man? Hey,
Yeah.
listen to this cool product I have.
I
Come on,
think
I
that's
know you
a
want to buy it.
fantastic question. And I think that you're already way ahead of me. Like when I started in sales, I like to joke. I'm like a wannabe stand-up comedian. So I have actually gotten on a call, actually as ZoomInfo, I was like trying to joke with this customer, and he ended up going to my manager and Julie and said that I was laughing at him, which I was not. I was laughing at myself. But I think it just really goes to like trying to match the tone of the person that you're speaking with. And look, I think that ultimately people buy from people that they like. So of course we are trying to be likable. And if you and I, like, we are different in every sense of the word, we're going to try to match your tone as much as possible to make ourselves likable. But I would just go in with confidence. I think that also is important when you're having those conversations. But also stay true to yourself. Sometimes, like, I will text prospects that are just not responding to my email, and they'll be really open to it, and they'll send me like an emoji and really kind of catch me off guard, which is not something I was expecting. I have colleagues that write super formal text messages, like they sign off like best Mari. Like, I'm not going to sign off my text. Like, that's just not how I do it. But that's kind of how they approached it. That's how they think, it's working out for them. You're going to know once you start to have more of those conversations, and again, have like that perception from how it's going from the customer's face.
Thanks so
Yeah, I
much.
think
That was interesting with breaking through with a text message, and versus, because emails, it could get sent to the spam folder, and then it's
Right.
Well, it's interesting you have that confidence and that hunch, like, oh, but would the recipient be open to, a text message in the first place, or is that too, too informal? So thanks for that.
If
Yeah, I think
it's
just
too
going
informal,
along.
they'll tell you
Yeah, I was
to.
gonna say, going along with that, they usually write back pretty quickly if it's not. And I think one of the things that we found is, I don't know about your personal email accounts, but like every store I buy something for has my email address now. Like, I'm getting so many emails that I can barely keep up with it. And so when you think of, someone's actual work email address, that could be the case as well. And so that's why sometimes a text is just a kind of nod of like a nudge of like, hey, have you seen my emails? That's also why, as you guys are kind of learning as you go through this, boot camp, is the touches, and why we say, don't just send one email or two emails. Mari and I were actually, Mari, I'm thinking of another customer we talked to once who was like, I called someone 3 times and they never returned my phone call. And I was like, that's like my best friend. She can call me 3 times and I won't return a phone call. I'm just busy. It's not because I don't like my best friend. It's just like the bad 3 times I was busy. And so I think that that's one of the things that we've noticed is the kind of cadence on the touches, but then also trying various different modes. And I think the one big thing is just always, when I say keep it professional, is know that of course someone could screenshot that and send it or post it somewhere, but no one, it's not bad if it's professional. Hey, Jason, it's Julie from ZoomInfo, just checking in. I've sent you a few emails, wanted to see if we can set up a time to talk. you can either write back, sure, or not interested. Very rarely you might see someone who's like, this is so inappropriate that you're texting my cell phone. I would say that often I feel when I see that there's a little bit more of a generation gap, but it also could just be personal style. I think in today's world, especially what I've learned through the pandemic, is that people are using their cell phone even more than they were prior, before the pandemic. And before then, we were using it a ton too. I was texting customers before then as well.
Yeah, and I know we have to get to the next question, but the last thing I was saying in there is that I've texted customers that I've pulled their cell phone from their signature. So
Right.
even if you're talking
Providing.
to someone outside of your generation, but their cell phone is in their signature, it might be an indicator that they're open. So there's a little bit of a nuance there when you're communicating and understanding how to communicate. If someone emails you all the time and their number is never on an email and you've had to like dig from the deep depths of ZoomInfo and they're gonna be angry about it, like, you win some, you lose some, apologize, like, so sorry, like, I'll show you an email next time.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Who was next? Was it Bernard?
Yes,
Look at
good
your
afternoon.
library there, Bernard. It looks awesome.
It's only for show. I'm just
No.
kidding. It's my security blanket right now. But pleasure to meet you, Julie and Mariana. But I'm Bernard again, transitioning service member with 26 years of active duty service in the Navy as a senior chief petty officer. You mentioned about, because I think Julie, right? You're in the HR department, so hiring. The concern really is for us getting into a company without that sales experience, because I've been doing a little bit of job searching and getting to sales positions, but most of those companies are looking for 1 to 5 years of experience. Yes, sales platoons. Yeah, we're getting the sales training, amazing training, and from Raleigh, but that's my concern. Trying to apply for it, submitting my resume. My concern is I don't have those sales experience. I have those soft skills to put in my resume or during the explain during the interview process, but that's the only thing. Getting into the company is I think is the major concern right now, because once we're in, I think we'll be able to adapt because of our experience in the military. We're coachable. We're all that stuff that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah,
Thank you.
for sure. I'd say, one thing I think I'd highlight is, look at what experience you've had in terms of selling, whether that was selling a project that cohorts had to be behind in your prior experiences, or even kind of the experiences you have within this, with Raleigh here, is highlight the actual things that you've done in your past that are related to sales. It might not been for a monetary exchange of like, hey, will you buy this and sign the contract? But you're always selling something in a sense, especially kind of in your prior positions, I'm sure. My boyfriend's in the Coast Guard. He's a commander in the Coast Guard based out of here in base Boston. When you said the Navy, my laptop actually is on a US Navy Complete History Naval Historical Foundation textbook. It's so big, it's a nice level for my laptop. But he's a mechanical and naval engineer, and I hear him working with the shipyard folks, and he's selling all the time, whether it be a deadline in some capacity of what they're trying to get done. It's just kind of pivoting that experience a little bit and talking about it. I'd also say when you're looking for a job, don't be afraid to take a job that you might feel like has a lower title. That's what I would do with that book too. Don't be afraid to take a job that might, seem like a more entry-level position, if it does seem like a company you want to be at. When I left EF, I was a director of sales. As I said, I kind of had been there for a little over 12 and a half years, but it was all I knew. I left. A huge reason for that was because I found I was sitting at home and realized that I basically had been in EF as long as you are in kindergarten through high school. And that's how long I've been there. And I was like, oh my gosh, think of how much development you have between kindergarten and high school. And I wanted to have a new change, a new experience. And I felt like it would also help give me some more confidence that I was, knew I could do sales, but I was really pigeonholed in what I had just had experience with. So when I came to ZoomInfo, I actually took a step back. I didn't go to manager. I went all the way back to an individual contributor as an account manager. Because for me, and what I needed was to feel really confident and kind of knowing what the job would be like that I would be managing and selling and helping my team. If I was going to help folks like Mari and kind of support a team, I really wanted to kind of get in the weeds a little bit, and that was key for me. It's not for everybody, but I think that sometimes people get a little hung up on, oh, okay, well, Julie was a director of sales. Wow, she's going all the way back to being an account manager. It was the best experience of my life. It also is what got me to where I am today. And I frequently say too, it doesn't really depend so much about the title as much about your happiness in the role. I loved being an individual contributor. I'm sure I've said it with Mari on the phone. I felt the most like the CEO of my own business almost as when I owned my own book, because I knew my accounts. I knew if I took a day off, I knew exactly what those accounts that I worked with were missing, what they need when I got back. I didn't leave the role because I wanted to be done with it. I left the role because another opportunity that would allow me to continue growing and challenging me in a way that excited me was presented. But I think that's the other thing too, when you look at roles, understand that you may start a little lower than you had hoped at some roles, whether that be as a BDR, kind of help setting up calls and appointments for an account executive, but that training and foundation will ultimately help pave a path for you and help you get a good, strong first floor. I always say, you want a strong, if you're building a house, you want a strong foundation. And sometimes that can help, and you might just be able to build quicker with that. So don't be hesitant to sometimes take those jobs that might seem perhaps a little bit more entry, if that is kind of a good company that you want to be at too.
Yeah. To add to that, Bernard, your first sales interview that you land the job, that's your first sale. It's your first sale, and you're going to start selling products. But in this case, I would just take a deep dive into the job post and yourself as a product, and you're going to find things on there that align. And there are companies out there that will not deviate from this is the experience. We know we want 17 years of experience, but we want you to also be 12 years old. There are just companies out there that are not going to deviate from what they want. I would focus on the companies that are willing to kind of trade in some of those soft skills for what they're getting in return. Focus on like everything that Jason kind of said here in the chat that are invaluable soft skills that a lot of other people don't have. And make the sale, close the sale. I always say, I use this after every single interview that I've ever had. I always ask, is there any reason why you were not hired? Just ask the question. And if it's something that you can change it for next time. And if it's something that it's not, then maybe that wasn't the right place for you at that point in time, but maybe it will be in the future.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Larry, what do you got?
Hey, Julie. Hey, Mariana. Thank you both for coming to share your experiences with us. I liked how, Julie, how you were talking to us about, don't be afraid of, taking a lower position in order to get into the weeds of thing and understand how the company operates. It's funny that, you guys were saying earlier how you were both in the medical majors going through college. I was also a nursing student in college. Okay, so let me get to the question. So based off of, and thanks for sharing your experiences again, but based off of those, what's a day look like for you guys, and what's a bad day look like for you, right? And how do you go about to getting over it?
Mari, I'll let you start with it, and then I'll pivot as well from there, just because I think, we'll both have different lenses.
Something that you might have heard already, and if you have not, you are going to hear at some point in your sales career, is focus on what you can control. I can only control my actions. So I can only, Julie says this to us all the time, every sales manager I've ever had, focus on what you can control. I can only control whether I'm calling my customers, whether I'm emailing, whether I'm putting in the effort. I cannot control whether they show up. I cannot control whether they decide to spend their budget with me. I cannot control whether they had a flat tire and then they hate me. I can only control what I can control. And my bad days are when I start to focus on things that I can't control, things that are beyond my control. So if I start to focus on the losses, things that, constantly focusing on all of the negative stuff, then that's kind of what turns into a bad day. And there are bad days because, just think of yourself as a consumer and all of the ads that you're targeted with and all of your purchasing options. You're not always going to buy everything, not even Jeff Bezos does. So there's always, even all of us here in this room are saying no to a seller at one point or another. And that's not that seller's fault. But if that seller is constantly focusing on that, then that's a pretty bad day. So speaking for myself, that's kind of how I look at my bad days if I'm constantly focusing on the losses or things that are not kind of going my way for one reason or another. A good day is when all of the things that you focused on, that you can control, everything is kind of falling in the right places. And whether you expected it or not, when things fall in the right place, it's a really, really, really good feeling. It's like, I always tell my husband, it's like, because he's in operations and he doesn't have deadlines. He's just kind of working on improving things, and there's no really set goal, right? If it's better than yesterday, it's all good, no matter if it's 1% or 100%. So I always tell him when you get a sale or when you hit quota, it's just such a rush. It just feels so good because you did the things that you could control and it ended up working out.
Yeah, and I'll just go off that. I also just was catching up on the chat, and one quick thing, Jason, I think you put a comment on selling and how you guys were selling every day in your prior roles, or your current roles too. And I think you're exactly correct. I think it brought me back to actually an interview I had once, where at one of my companies, my last company, we used to ask when we were interviewing, pitch me on something you're passionate about. And what we were asking was not to pitch us on how, someone once, talked about Syrian refugees, for instance, very passionate, emotional 2-minute pitch on it, but it didn't actually inspire me to take any action. It was just I was like, oh, wow, that is a issue that she just discussed about. I had someone else pitch me about the Jimmy Fund and donating and why I should, and how instead of stopping at Starbucks once a week, that $5 and what it could do. And it made me rethink, why go buy a latte when I could just go donate to the Jimmy Fund? And so I think of yourselves too, if you were ever to, talk to someone who was thinking of going into the military or the branch of service that you were in, what would you say about it? How would you pitch them on it? And if it is something you'd pitch them on, kind of what would be the value there? And I think that is exactly sales. So you're completely right there. Kind of going into, Larry, your question of what's a bad day. There's so many. I can be my harshest critic. I would say ultimately it's when I disappoint myself. I hate doing something that I should, missing an email in my inbox, which I do more often than I'd like. When I disappoint myself, I have a high standard for myself. And I also think that I still am constantly growing and improving though. So I am frustrated when I disappoint myself, but I also try to use that so that I can continue to grow, as cheesy as that may sound. Of course, a bad day too could be when you talk to customers and there's just, take COVID in the heat of the pandemic, when we were having a lot of companies having a financial crisis of their own, wanting to get out of contracts, and we weren't able to just release contracts either. Those were really hard days. But it was a different level of hard, I guess I would say, than kind of the hard days of when I can feel like I didn't do as much as I could have done. And my good days are the days that I surprised myself and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I navigated that really difficult call and was able to get the value over and ended with this awesome sale, or whatever it may be. But I always think back to exercise I used to do at one of my prior company. It was kind of called comfort, panic, and challenge. And where we grow the most is when we're not in the comfort stage or when they're in the panic stage. If you're panicked, you're just freaked out. If you're comfort, you're not challenged. So where we grow the most is when we're in that challenged phase. And so I do try to always make sure that I am challenging myself. In working on, our CEO, Henry, always says, work on getting 1% better. every day. And he says, he won't be the same CEO next year that he was this prior year. And it's because he's always looking, we all can be constantly evolving and improving our best version of ourselves. And I think that's where kind of my disappointing days can be when I, like I said, I let something slip through the cracks. I wasn't there to support my staff. If Mari needed me for something and I wasn't able to make it, or I missed a call just because my calendar got away from me. Those are of course days that I get like a bad day. But I think just knowing how I can pivot and minimize those and put a plan in place to just keep getting 1% better every day is what kind of helps me also just constantly keep improving, and hopefully continuing to hit my goals as they improve and increase as well.
Yeah, that's a great point too, Julie, because I think that a lot of times maybe sales kind of, you have this view of like it's really stressful and is it a lot of bad days, but every job has bad days, whether you're a heart surgeon and the stakes are really, really high, or you're in operations like my husband, then maybe the stakes aren't, they're a little different, but every day has bad days. Are you willing to kind of take your bad days and say, hey, tomorrow it's going to be 1% better because of my actions, because of what I'm going to do to pivot from here.
Any other questions?
I know you guys aren't shy.
Hi, Mariana and Julie. I do. Thank you both for taking time to speak to our cohort today. And Mariana, I can definitely relate to your story. I also come from an immigrant background and family. And
Brazilian?
Brazilian, yes.
Bruno Saraiva, como que eu não ia saber que você é brasileiro?
Então, eu também pensei que Mariana era português. Que bom,
Sorry,
que
you guys,
legal.
we'll switch to English.
Yeah.
Por su tiempo.
So it's great to hear your story. My parents also wanted me to be a doctor. I did the best next thing. I joined as an Army medic. And so
you got closer than I did. So.
Yeah. So thank you both also for ZoomInfo. Working with ZoomInfo has made life very easy. You're sharing your experience of having to hunt down that information and put it onto an Excel document and go from there. And I'll tell you, this week we're getting full blown into cold calling, and ZoomInfo makes that process of getting our list, uploading it to HubSpot so much easier that I've been having a lot more time to focus on my script, my pitch, delivery, working on the overcoming objections. So I know I speak on behalf of a lot of people. Really appreciate being able to work with ZoomInfo. You guys have been great. My question isn't directly related to a sales experience, but as I'm on the phone and making calls, I have my LinkedIn that's pulled up, and I'm constantly getting messages from people, either trying to get me to some screen time with them to sell something basically. And I was wondering what your thoughts are on that, on using your LinkedIn platform for prospecting. Is that okay, or is that recommended?
Yeah, absolutely. I would use any and all of the tools that are available to you, including LinkedIn is a very powerful social media tool. It's powerful because people get to see what you look like. They get to kind of click around and engage. Something that I haven't done as well that I highly recommend you do is engage with content, make connections with people that focus on those versus just connecting with anyone and everyone, because that's kind of going to lead you to the next connection. Engage with content. I'm constantly seeing posts online about buyers that purchased from people that they found on LinkedIn, or that engaged with their content on LinkedIn, or made a suggestion, kind of like a soft entry versus like a hard sell. So highly recommend you continue doing that. Sounds like you're on the right track.
Yeah, I was going to say that's just one of those areas where it's my weakness, LinkedIn, and like beefing up, so to say, my own professional social presence on LinkedIn. I'm on there, I use it, but I have colleagues that are much more active, and it's something that I honestly admire, and I'd love to get to. It's just I'm much more of a let me just kind of go deal by deal. And I think that the benefit of LinkedIn too is how many of you guys have bought something because a friend recommended you buy it? Most of us probably have. Yeah. And I think that's something where on LinkedIn, you can sometimes organically just have that type of, selling without selling by sharing content. And as Mari said, engaging. And so that's where Of course, it's a fine line. You want to make sure that someone's not like, if I, for instance, saw Mari on LinkedIn all day long, uploading clips of her talking to about say, like ideas and things like that, I'd be like, when is your customer calls? Just managing a full book of business. But I think that LinkedIn is certainly a great way to build your network. And I think, you know, as Mari said, I think I value the people who make connections once I've kind of connected with them. There are a lot of requests I get of people that I've just never met. And I like literally have no clue why they've sent me a request. And I'm looking to see if there's a mutual connection. I'm looking in our applicant tracking system, like, are they trying to get a job here? There's no message. I think those ones sometimes I just like leave there. But whenever I meet with a client, whenever I have sessions like this, it's always, you know, where I love then connecting with folks after that. That makes sense to me. It's just those kind of shot in the dark, like blind ones. And we will occasionally, of course, do that too when we are trying to reach out to a prospect, but it's to follow up to an email. If you think of your sequence and your cadence on touching someone, you know, a couple emails and calls, perhaps you then do try LinkedIn and you send them a message. I would just say that, you know, I, for instance, get so many LinkedIn messages that way too. It could work, it could not, just like with a text message or even just an email or a phone call.
Yeah. And I actually, circling back to your point, Bernard, I actually have a colleague who is in high enough that she has to, no, sorry, not a colleague, a friend who has to hire people. And she sits with her recruiter and they go through LinkedIn profiles that they want to try to recruit. So I would also like think of LinkedIn as your own kind of way of selling yourself, and beef it up with all of the stuff that you can, all of your accolades, put in some information about the work that you're putting in, like the training that you're learning, everything that you're learning in Sales Platoon. Put in, like, take the ZoomInfo certification and put on there, like, that you're certified in the sales, like, certification from ZoomInfo. Read some like HubSpot blog posts, put in that you have experience with HubSpot. Bruno, you're bilingual, put that on there. So really use it not just to sell, but to sell yourself as well, because there could be somebody visiting your LinkedIn profile that could be your next connection for your next role. Did you take it, Larry, the certification?
I'm still working on it. I'm like inching my way up to the passing score.
Yeah. Honestly, I'll tell you, I took our internal one and it was pretty hard for me even. So I get it, but that's a great selling point, right? You go into an interview and they say like something like you don't have experience, and you can say, well, actually.
Yeah, actually, I do.
Right.
Platoon. And an absolute.
What questions you guys have? Anybody else? Lucas, Omari, Tika, Lance, some of the quiet ones. Any thoughts or parting questions?
Tika. There we go.
Well, I don't have a question per se, but Julie mentioned like selling the military, and I remember when I went through my transition classes back in March, there was a soldier with me. It was probably about 6 or 7 of us, and I was the only person in the class that was retiring. And this particular soldier, he reminded me a lot of me because he was an E4. Like my first 4 years, I got out of the Army, but not completely out. I was just on terminal leave for like 30 days. So he was essentially like in the same position. He was, you know, he's doing his transition classes. And so I'm talking to him and just trying to figure out, you know, what he had planned. And, you know, he was like, he pretty much said he didn't have a plan. He was just going to get out. And I'm like, well, why? You know, I was like, this is your first assignment. You know, I was like, the Army, I said, I understand the Army has its bad days and all. I said, but not every day is like that. I'm like, the military is essentially what you make of it. I was like, and you're just starting your career. I'm like, don't do it. I said, at least do one more assignment before you decide to phone it in and be like, oh, you're done with it. I was like, go someplace else, go to a new assignment or whatever. I was like, but don't get out now, because I'm like, you don't have a plan. You have no idea what you want to do, where you're going to go, or anything like that. And so the next day, by the end of the next day, he told me that he essentially contacted the retention, and he was going to re-enlist like later on that week. So I'm like, good, you know, I'm like, do it. I was like, you have nothing to lose. I'm like, do it for 2 years. That's exactly what I did. I re-enlisted every 2 years because it was the thought of doing more than 2. I'm like, at a time, it was like a mind game. I'm like, I can't do more than 2 years at a time. So that's essentially what I did. And now I'm 21 years later, I'm retiring. So, you know,
That's
but you
amazing.
know, I was just like, just stay in and do another, at least one more assignment before you decide to, you know, hang up the uniform for good. I'm like, you haven't really experienced the Army yet. So,
Well, I think now 21 years that is experiencing it. So that's amazing. And I think while I would say kind of having that talk with a fellow colleague like you did, I cannot speak to what a bad day in any of your, it says internet unstable. Hopefully it's not affecting me too much. Okay, good. I would say kind of just to pivot that too, in terms of when you're talking to clients, know that that can happen to them too. So there's sometimes that you're on a call and someone hangs up or they're mean really quickly to you. It might not be you. It could just be a call that they got off of. It could just be something that crossed their plate. And that's why I think one of the really hard parts about sales is getting knocked down and kind of going back at it. But like I said, all of you guys have experiences that have put you in certainly hard situations where you've had to mentally prove your toughness and have. And so I'm confident that, you know, you'll all be fine there, but know too that when you call someone, if they're offended by a text that you sent, it could just be you caught them at that wrong time, and call them into a week later and you could get a totally different person. It's all about kind of how you re-engage them, just checking in. I know it was a really short call last week. I feel like I caught you at a bad time. Just wanted to circle back, things like that, because I think that that is something too that you will see. Of course, though, there are times too where like if you get a job and you're waking up day after day in sales and not happy, I think that's also kind of when, as adults, we can make the decision now, especially kind of to choose to do something that makes us a little bit happier. Of course, there are the days that I wake up and I'm like, oh, got to get ready for our 8 a.m. meeting. Love to stay in bed a little longer. But for the most part, you know, wanting to make sure that you are finding, especially in a sales role, a company where you feel that you are inspired and just challenged, but excited to go to work for the most part every day, I think is key too, especially after all the hard work you guys have all put in your prior careers. Anything else? Anything else we missed covering, Raleigh?
Just what the world always wanted, a mute button for Raleigh. So that is now officially available to anybody that wants it on Zoom. But no, I thought guys did a great job, Mariana and Julie, and I really appreciate you coming and speaking with the cohort. I think it's one thing to hear what we do, it's another to see it. And usually I'll challenge, I say, pick out the special forces person, pick out the electrician, pick out the engineer, pick out the nurse. You can't do it. Officer and enlisted can't do it. But their experiences are diverse as the military, and their backgrounds are diverse as well. And I appreciate, you know, you people coming, because it's just good to hear from successful salespeople that, you know, you talked about everything that I didn't even ask you to talk on, that was from you know, a career in sales, why being an individual contributor is a lifelong pursuit, and it's actually owning your own business within a business. It's something I talk about quite often. You talked about the different tools that they're going to use, which are ones that we did. And hopefully for the cohort members, it reinforced that what you're going through is a very, very unique process. This is not available if you went straight to ZoomInfo. They're not going to take you on a 90-day, no quota learning to sell with live instructors, and then you get a quota at month 4. It's probably not going to happen that way. You're going to get thrown into the fire and you'll learn. So there's pluses and minuses to each side, but they have a ton of really good onboarding program, training programs. So just appreciate y'all coming out. So when we hang up, is there anything you wish you had said to them that you didn't get a chance to, or you're like, what do I want to leave them with? Maybe a short 30 seconds, and then we'll take a picture and end the call.
One thing I just thought of, but it was I think Bruno, you were saying you're working on your cold calling and pitch and things like that. I think also recognizing, like when you say cranking out calls and cold calling, no one's like, oh, that's the best part of my day. I love every minute of it. Mari and I are both in sales and we're on the account management side. Know what you don't like about it and what you do like about it, in the sense that what I wasn't an account executive. I was always on the account management side, but it was really fun to put down the kind of customer questions, the more technical things that sometimes you get sucked into, and just say, like, I'm just going to crank out some calls and sell and work on what is my elevator pitch. You always say, if you got stuck in an elevator with someone just going from the first floor up to the fifth, and you tell them about your product, what would it be? You know, and I think that's something where I still, with all of the products ZoomInfo has, it's a work in progress for me. So just know that if you have people that hang up on you, sales is always kind of an evolving work in progress. And how I sold when I started back in 2005 is not how we sell today. And I think that's one of the things too, is just know that there are going to be parts of the job too that might push you to be a little uncomfortable. Cold calling and having people not hang up right on me so I can get my pitch out is still always something I work on as well.
Great. Thank you. Mari?
I was just going to say, I'm going to follow up with you guys via email. I'm going to send you, we actually just launched a new website called The Pipeline. It's kind of something that we put our plays and strategies on there, like tactics that we actually use here in-house, that from both our account executive and account management and demand generation teams. So I'll send it over. We're happy to always do this. Like, our door is always open. So don't hesitate to ping us if you guys have any questions. Let's get that photo.
All right, sounds good. All right, Lonnie, are you all set for our photo today?
I'm all set. I'll count it down from 3.
All right.
All right, 3, 2, 1. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great to meet you guys. Thank
Great.
you.
Guys, I look forward to seeing you a little later in the week, so appreciate
That
it.
sounds good. Bye, guys.
All right, guys, you're on break now, so you're at lunch.